Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Biz Buzz with Heather and Sean. I'm here with my colleague and podcast partner, Sean Beharry. And today we are here to talk to you about what really makes a good sponsor, a good project sponsor. So, Sean, we're going to jump right in.
Absolutely.
Let's start on the positive questions, Sean. Let's ask you, in your experience, what are the top 2 or 3 qualities that define a truly good project sponsor?
Really, really good topic, Heather, and I'm glad we're getting to discuss it. Before we talk about the qualities themselves, what I wanted to maybe do a little bit of a differentiation is between what an executive sponsor is and then your day-to-day sponsor, or the person that acts as a sponsor lead. So depending on the organization, smaller organizations, they're one and the same. Your executive sponsor is your day-to-day sponsor. That's the person who gives your marching orders. They provide the vision of what the project is supposed to be, what it's supposed to deliver in the end, what success looks like. Very clearly, they can articulate what that is and they can define that. There are also the individuals who are able to make the key decisions on a day-to-day basis and on things that are more strategic, as well as they're also the person who can clear any obstacles or roadblocks that the project team might encounter during the course of the life of the project. So to me, those are the three key things that any project team really wants to get from a sponsor. Going back to the differentiation, when you get to a larger organization, sometimes the executive sponsor is an SVP, a VP, an executive vice president, somebody who's far removed from it, and they will assign somebody to act as their day-to-day hands-on lead, sponsor lead on that initiative, who they've been given the same sort of accountabilities and responsibilities as the executive sponsor themselves.
Nice. I love that. And thank you for doing that clarification because I think that's amazing. For me, for example, when I'm working with my smaller clients, the client themselves is often the sponsor, right? They are the one whom I go to say, what does success look like to you? And I'm doing it right now with a client. I'm going into a call with their corporate clients next week saying, hey, dear client, my client, what does success look like for you? But
Mhm.
then I need to go to their client because they're corporate and ask them who their sponsor is for their project. Because in their space, it's not necessarily the chief technology officer. It might be a leader within their business that's going to sponsor us because that CTO is too busy and has too much going on. So I very much am able to take what you just used as an example and apply it to my reality when working with small businesses and potentially projects with their clients. So thank you for clarifying that. I think that makes complete sense. So
I actually think where you can get the sponsor to be the person who's actually able to make the decisions, set the direction, if you can get that person to be engaged on a day-to-day basis or frequently enough to be able to help ensure that you're on the right path and the team's got what they need, that is the best scenario possible. In larger organizations, it is not possible, just given the magnitude of scale of what they're doing. But in a small organization, to me, even if you can get that in a large organization, that is the sweet spot.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like it's just they're there consistently, they're visibly supporting you and the team. It really does help the motivation and keeping it move forward. And it keeps people like me, for example, just in the know of where they are at. Because if not, there might be gaps that we're not aware of as, project leaders. We need to have that regular touch point with sponsors. They're not always thinking, oh, I need to tell the project manager that. Oh, I need to tell the team that, right? We need to work with them regularly to try to pull it out of them. So I love that, having strategic alignment, knowing what that vision is. They don't just fund it, they understand the why and they drive the why. And they can really help articulate the value of this project to the team. So I think that's awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. And they also help to course correct. A business is an ever-changing entity. And sometimes priorities change. Sometimes, as you discover, challenges, there are complications. We may have to pivot a little bit. And having the sponsor there to understand that and to provide that feedback and insight is really, really important. And that day-to-day involvement or frequent enough involvement, you may not get them day to day, but frequent enough involvement also does a lot to help engage the team and motivate them. That is so important because if the team members know and see that the sponsor really wants this and it's important, they're going to raise their game as well.
Yeah. And I love that, the sponsor or the champion or whomever, having visibility to the people you're trying to motivate to get on board. It's often change management. Why are we doing this? That's where your sponsor really needs to champion that project. So great points. Thank you.
100%. Okay. So, we talked about all of the good things, the two or three good things, right? We talked about engagement. We talked about vision. We've talked about clearing roadblocks. We've talked about having accountability and the ability to make decisions on a timely basis. But now we want to flip the script a little bit and talk about sometimes working with a sponsor or a sponsor lead can be a little bit challenging. And the question becomes, what are those challenges? And I'll start just because I'm the projects person. And I think really is the opposite of what we just talked about, right? So if the sponsor is I've given you the project, I've given the team the project, and you guys figure it out, and away we go, and they're not engaged, then sometimes the team, one, they can flounder because they don't have direction, it's not very clear, right? And secondly, sometimes what they return as a final product or solution or service may not actually align with what the sponsor is looking for. And that can lead to a lot of discomfort. So having an engaged sponsor and somebody who's really involved really is helpful to the team, which leads me to my third point, which is sometimes what I find is that in many cases, the sponsor actually wants to be the project manager. And so they actually take on more of a role of the project management person and lead, and then they're not making decisions, right?
Yeah.
And the team feels that because sometimes it feels like it's a lack of trust.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as you're talking too, that's why it is so important when a leader or a group selects who that sponsor is, right? Because I feel like when someone is maybe voluntold that they're going to sponsor a project or a piece of work, and they're not really committed to it or into it, they're only doing it because, well, they had to, how are they showing up? Right? Are they showing up as that strategic leader? Are they giving the guidance that the project team needs? Are they aligned with the leader of the group or organization? Are they meeting with that leader regularly to know how to communicate any changes or pivots? So there's all of these pieces that are wrapped around who is the person, right? And what is their commitment to that project, I think is huge. So on that, Sean, can you talk maybe about the selection process of a sponsor in a group? How would someone go about that?
I would say it's somebody who has that alignment, who
Right?
has that trust, and is actually a good leader, right? And this
Yes.
goes back to our conversation with Laura a few months ago, which is what makes a good leader. And a good leader isn't somebody who's going to be far removed and not be part of the process, but they're also somebody who isn't going to just micromanage. So it's about treating people like professionals,
Yeah.
right? So they set the direction, they provide the guidance. When things are going a little bit askew, they help to bring it back in. But at the same point in time, they're giving the team the amount of autonomy it needs to make the decisions, right? We brought experts in for a reason. And so we need to give those experts a chance to demonstrate that. So to me, it goes back to picking leaders who are good people managers, as well
Mm-hmm.
as they have the alignment on the product and what the product or service, the end vision that success looks like.
Right. And we know often that that doesn't happen. That, and I think that's a big gap. We would assign a project to someone as part of their, goals and objectives. But is it really what they want to do and where their passion lies and what they're good at? And if it's not, then that's maybe where we're setting the project or the team up not for success potentially. So,
True. One of the other challenges is even if the person is aligned, even if the person wants to do it, oftentimes they're doing it off of the side of their desks.
yes.
So
Mm-hmm.
they've got a full daytime job that they want to do. And on the side, they're trying to run this project.
Yeah.
Something is going to suffer.
Yes.
And more times than not, the thing that suffers is the project, right? People get paid to do their day job. And if their day job is not doing projects, then they're going to deprioritize that just subconsciously and prioritize the things that I'm truly accountable for. So it's not always possible. Maybe in a small organization, it is less possible. But that is something that executives, sponsors themselves then need to be mindful of, which is if I'm going to give this to somebody who already has a full plate, I need to recognize that something's got to give. And I need to help them decide what is going to give. Because then, to your point, you're not setting that person or the team or the project up for success.
Yeah. In a small organization, say a very small business where there's four people and you have very few resources, that is one of, for me, for example, that's one of the key things I need to do is say, A, is the sponsor who's often the business owner aligned in this? And is it a priority to them? Because very much to your point, if it's not a priority to them, I'm working on things then that I shouldn't be working on,
Correct.
hence taking my time, which should not be the focus. So ensuring that I'm touching base regularly with that leader to say, like, is this what you still want me to be working on? Because if so, project B that was priority is going to fall down to project Z right now, and we're going to bring this one up to the top. So it really is prioritizing those projects for a small business often, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but project managers like yourself that go into an organization, that is your main goal, right? That is your main focus. Where someone like me who's managing multiple things with small businesses, it is much more challenging, I would say much more necessary to ensure we're working on all of the right things.
Correct. And I would
Yep.
I would agree with you in saying it's challenging, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a large organization, you would think that you've got a lot more people to go around on the business side, and so one person can be more dedicated on a project. Unfortunately, what I've seen is that in many cases, there are a few select individuals who are the subject matter expertise. They're closer to leadership, maybe a little bit more aligned, and those are the ones who we tap on constantly. So
Yes.
we're not just tapping on them to do one project. They may be
Mm-hmm.
involved in three, four, five projects because that's the person.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's great if they have the capability to pull those people out of their day to day to solely focus on the project, right? And always depends on the size and the scope of the project and the business and these types of things. But I've always found that best when I get pulled out of the day to day to focus on some form of implementation. I'm the SME, subject matter expert, that has got pulled out to say, you're working on this solely for the next 6 months. I find that's value add to a project. So they're not doing it off the side of their desk. So it's not one additional thing they're doing. They can focus on it alongside with the project
Agreed.
owner.
I also
Great.
think there are things that the project team can do to help compensate. Because the reality is, it's not always possible to replace them with a backup, a backfill,
Yes.
if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And in a small organization, that is probably less possible. So, as project managers, as project team members, we can also look to find ways to try to help manage the time and the engagement requirement of sponsors as well. And so one of the things I've done in the past is we've set, I'm going to call it project work times, where we need the sponsor. So we know that, you go in to work in the morning, let's say you get in there at 8, between 8 and 10, that's the sponsor's dedicated time to address any day-to-day issues. Then between 10 and 12 or 10 and 1 o'clock, give a break for lunch. That is dedicated project time. So the sponsor is engaged in meetings and follow-ups and conversations and helping to set direction and those types of things. And then from, let's say, 2 o'clock, 2 o'clock till the end of the day, the project team then works on whatever has been discussed. They advance those materials, those plans, those designs, solutions on their own, so that the next day when they re-engage with the sponsor at 10 o'clock, let's say, they can show, here's what we've done with what you talked about. Are we on the right track? You can, let's go on to the next one. So you can manage the time in such a way that it allows the sponsor lead, or the person assigned to the project, time at their desk, time on the project, but everybody has to agree to that.
Is that like an agile kind of workflow where like, okay, this is the direction we got. Now we're going to go ahead and work on it. And then next we're going to, have a meeting again and say, like, would that be considered agile?
It's an agile methodology for sure, right? It requires a lot more planning, and you've got to be really precise on what are we going to work on today. So it begins to move the organization to work in a more iterative or agile way so that we can iterate through things much faster. You've got more engagement. You've got decisions being made more quickly. So it is a form of agile methodology, kind of a sprint approach, if you will. Right?
Yes,
For the
right.
next week, this is what we're going to focus on, even in a waterfall environment.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. So, Sean, we've talked about, what makes a not great sponsor. Let's talk about how we, bridge these gaps. How do we ensure that the managers of the project, the team members, and the sponsors are all aligned to the same goal?
So we just touched on one aspect of it, which is project managers can help by creating dedicated time slots so that it's respectful of the sponsors' day-to-day activities, their real jobs, if you will. It gives them proper time for engagement, and then it gives them more time to do their project and gives the team also time to do work, right? If you're just with the sponsor all the time, then when's the work getting done? So that's one thing. I think as well, being transparent with your sponsor or sponsor lead, being
Yeah.
more of a thought leader in terms of helping them to see where and how you're going to do the project is also important, right? By doing that, you give them the assurance that you know what you're doing, there's a method to your madness, and that they're going to be kept in the loop, right?
Yes.
It gives them the opportunity to give you feedback and say, well, I have concerns about this, I'm not sure about that, and it gives you a chance to level set, get at that alignment, right? We talked about the alignment of the executive or the business leader to the sponsor. Now we're talking about the alignment of the sponsor to the project team itself. So when we can do that, I think that is really helpful. Raising issues early and often,
Yes.
not just work, right? If you're just saying, yeah, I've got this work to do, well, that's work. But when you see something that you think can make the project go askew, even giving a heads up, what are we going to do about it? This is what I'm thinking. Those things will help to build trust in the sponsor so that they give you the autonomy you need, gets them away from the micromanaging. Because if, as a project team, you're not stepping your game up, we talked about in how to be a good consultant, right? If you're not stepping up your game to demonstrate the thought leadership, to demonstrate the proactive thinking and action planning, to demonstrate the ability to raise issues and do the research and ask the right questions so that there's clarity, If you're not doing those things, the sponsor is going to think, well, they don't get it, therefore I need to be more involved. So it's a bit of a give and take. The more the team can do to demonstrate leadership on their own, the more the sponsor can be engaged in a different way.
Yeah, right. Your project sponsor is your partner, right? They are your
100%.
partner. They are there to open those doors, to remove those barriers that the team might have, to ensure the importance of the project is top of mind, and there to support and cheer on and be the sponsor of the project. So this has been a great conversation, Sean. Any last minute words of wisdom you'd want to pass on?
So I think being a good sponsor means being engaged. It means providing clear direction. It means helping the team through those challenges that the team is facing. And by the same extension, being a good project team means being engaged, demonstrating thought leadership, raising things early enough so that we're not just in crisis mode, trying to circumvent something when it's a bit too late. So it's give and take on both sides. I think every sponsor wants to get the job done and get it done correctly, but we also need to make sure that we're helping them get their jobs done.
Right, exactly. Well, thank you, Sean. Thank you for sharing your insights, and we will see you next time on the
See you
Biz.
next time on the Biz Buzz. Keep that
Keep the
buzz
buzz
going.
going.
Bye now.